We all assume that the more you know, the better you are at solving problems. But what if that's not always the case? What if your own expertise can kind of build a wall around your mind, trapping you and keeping you from seeing the perfect solution that's hiding in plain sight?
And that's really the big question we're asking today. Can the very knowledge that makes you an expert also become your biggest blind spot? It sounds like a total paradox, right? But it's a real phenomenon, and trust me, the research behind it is absolutely fascinating. So here's where things get interesting. You've got two completely opposite ideas. On one hand, there's this common belief, and yeah, some research backs it up, that being an expert makes your thinking kind of rigid, almost robotic. You just get so good at doing something one way, you can't even see another. But then, on the other hand, you've got all this research on peak performers that says the exact opposite, that true expertise actually makes you incredibly mentally flexible. So, which one is it? And look, this isn't just some random idea. We've got psychologists like Robert Sternberg who've been talking about this for years. The argument is that experts can get so stuck in their ways, so entrenched in their methods, that they literally become blind to any other path. And that is the perfect setup for a really clever cognitive track.
And that trap? Oh, it has a name. It's called the Einstellung Effect. It's a German word, kind of means mindset or attitude, and it's this sneaky cognitive bias that can trick even the absolute smartest people into completely missing a simple, elegant solution.
Okay, so here's the key idea. Your brain finds a solution that works, especially if it's one you've used before, and it just latches on. And that first thought, it acts like a mental roadblock. It literally stops you from looking for or even noticing other options that might be way, way better. All right, to really get a feel for how this works, we don't need to get all complicated. In fact, the most famous example of this effect uses something super simple, just measuring water.
So picture this. It's a classic experiment from way back in 1942. They taught people this kind of complicated formula to solve a bunch of water jug puzzles. And people got really good at it, right? But then, the researchers gave them a new set of problems, and for these, there was a much simpler solution. But you guessed it, their brains were already stuck, locked into that familiar, more complex way of doing things.
And we're not talking about a small thing here. A whopping 80% of the people in the study completely missed the easy solution. Their own recent success literally blinded them to what was right in front of them. It's just a perfect example of how easily our minds can get stuck in a rut. But, okay, that's regular people. What about real, seasoned experts?
Well, to figure that out, researchers turned to the world of chess. I mean, it's the perfect laboratory for the expert mind, right? They cooked up this brilliant experiment and brought in everyone from really skilled masters all the way up to the world's absolute elite, the grandmasters. Okay, so they showed all these players this exact chess position. The instruction was simple: find the fastest way for white to win. And because the players were from all different skill levels, it was the perfect test to see if having more knowledge was actually a help or a hindrance.
Now, baked into this puzzle is a really classic, famous checkmate pattern. It's called a smothered mate. It's this elegant 5-move sequence that every single one of these players would spot in a heartbeat. And that is the Einstellung trap, the familiar, perfectly good solution that jumps out at you.
But here's the twist. There's also a better solution. A much faster, more efficient 3-move win. Now, it's not as obvious, it's not a textbook pattern you memorize, but it is, without a doubt, the optimal move. It's just sitting there, hidden in plain sight. So this sets up the ultimate question, doesn't it? Would the expert's deep knowledge of patterns, like that smothered mate, actually work against them? Would it lock their brains onto that first solution and blind them to the better one? Or would their incredible skill actually let them see past the trap?
Well, let me tell you, the results were not just interesting, they were staggering. And they tell us something really profound about what expertise truly is.
Check this out. The best of the best, the grandmasters, they found that optimal 3-move win about 64% of the time. Pretty good. But look what happens as you go down the ladder just a bit. The success rate just plummets. International masters, 32%. Regular masters, only 12%. And the candidate masters, who are still fantastic players by the way, they only found it 1% of the time. 1%. This wasn't some gentle slope, you guys. It was a cliff, a complete and total collapse in performance. It's like the regular experts were almost completely blinded by that familiar 5-move solution, while the super experts, they somehow managed to see past it.
And just to put that in perspective for you, having that familiar but worse solution on the board literally dropped the problem-solving skill of the regular experts down to the level of a player 3 standard deviations weaker. That's a massive drop. It's like a seasoned pro suddenly playing like a total amateur. So what on earth is going on here?
Okay, so the big question isn't just what happened, it's why it happened. How did the Grandmasters manage to sidestep the very same trap that caught all their slightly less skilled peers? The answer, well, it gets right to the heart of what it really means to be an expert.
This is the really wild part. Every single player, and I mean everyone, including the Grandmasters, they all saw the familiar 5-move solution first, so their brains all fell for the initial trap. The difference was what they did in the next few seconds. The regular experts pretty much stopped there, blocked by that first good enough answer. But the Grandmasters' brains, they just kept working. Their knowledge was so deep, so nuanced, that when they did their mental double-check, they were able to spot the better option.
So, the key takeaway here is that being a top-tier expert isn't about somehow magically avoiding that obvious first thought. It's about having the mental flexibility, the deeply ingrained knowledge, to question that first thought, to keep looking for something better, even when you've already found a perfectly good answer. Okay, so let's bring it all the way back to that paradox we started with. Does being an expert make you rigid, or does it make you flexible? Well, it turns out the answer is kind of both. It really just depends on how much of an expert you are. You know, the researchers who did the study, they said it best. For your typical skilled expert, yeah, becoming inflexible is a real risk. But for a super expert, someone who's at the absolute top of their game, that rigidity seems to just melt away, and it's replaced by this incredible ability to see the whole picture. And this leads us to a really counterintuitive idea. The way you beat the blind spots that your own knowledge creates isn't by knowing less, it's by knowing more. It's about pushing past that good enough level of expertise until your knowledge gets so deep and so rich that it actually becomes the source of your flexibility, not your rigidity. So I'll leave you with this question to chew on, something to think about in our own work, our own lives. In the areas where you're an expert, what's the good enough solution you always reach for? And could it be stopping you from seeing the truly brilliant one that's hiding right there in plain sight?